the human being has built his own end with hands too small to understand it. This is the tragedy that runs through the entire body of thought of Günther Anders, a thinker who dedicated his life to exposing the contradictions of a modern world, capable of engineering its own destruction, while remaining unable to take true responsibility for it. Günther Anders, born Günther Siegmund Stern in 1902 in Breslau, Poland, to a Jewish intellectual family, lived through the 20th century as a sharp and restless observer. He studied philosophy under Edmund Husserl and was a classmate, and for a short time, husband, of Hannah Arendt. Philosopher, writer, and relentless critic of technology and the culture industry, he was among the first to recognize that the real danger of modernity lies not just in the power of technology itself, but in the growing gap between what humanity can build and what it is capable of imagining. He called this gap the Promethean disparity, and saw it as the force slowly pushing the human being to the margins of a world increasingly ruled by its own creations. His major work, The Obsolescence of Man, is the beating heart of his philosophical legacy. It's divided into 2 volumes. The first, published in 1956, titled Reflections on the Soul in the Era of the Second Industrial Revolution, and the second, released in 1980, titled On the Destruction of Life in the Era of the Third Industrial Revolution. These are essential texts for understanding how technology is devouring the human dimension, making obsolete the ethical, political, and existential frameworks that once gave meaning to history. Anders spent much of his life in exile. After the rise of Nazism, he fled first to Paris and then to the United States, where he lived as both an outsider and a privileged observer of mass society and the power of the media. After World War II, he returned to Europe and settled in Vienna, where he died in 1992. Though his work is less well known than that of other 20th century thinkers, Anders has had a quiet but profound influence on generations of intellectuals, activists, and philosophers. His point of departure is the atomic bomb, not as an isolated event, but as a symbol of an age in which humanity has become capable of engineering its own extinction without truly grasping what that means. The bombing of Hiroshima on August 6, 1945 for Anders does not merely mark the end of World War II, it marks the beginning of a new era, one in which we are omnipotent in a negative way, that is, capable of destroying everything, including ourselves. It's the paradox of total impotence in an age of technical omnipotence. He described it as the final era, since from that moment on, the human species has held in its hands the real possibility of self-annihilation. In The Obsolescence of Man, Anders expands on the idea of the Promethean Gap. In his view, modern humanity has developed tools and technologies so advanced that they exceed our moral and imaginative capacities. It's as if our hands are capable of building the apocalypse, but our minds cannot visualize it. From this stems a sense of inferiority and shame toward the very machines we've created. In one of his most powerful insights, he writes, "We have become reverse utopians. While utopians can imagine what they cannot produce, we cannot imagine what we have already produced. Machines don't sleep, don't eat, don't pause. Human beings do. But in the logic of technical civilization, this is seen as a flaw, not a strength." Anders denounces this inversion where everything human is discarded as inefficient, slow, and expendable. In this context, the atomic bomb is not an exception. It is the logical outcome of a broader process. It is the pure product of technology, flawless in its monstrosity, and for that reason, even more dangerous. Its very existence is already an act, a silent threat hanging over all of humanity. In his famous 1959 letter to Claude Atherley, a former U.S. Air Force major involved in the Hiroshima mission, Günther Anders explores the idea of the innocently guilty. In his diary dedicated to Hiroshima and Nagasaki, Anders recounts the story of Major Claude Etherly, one of the pilots involved in the atomic operation. He didn't drop the bomb himself, but he was the one who gave the green light after confirming favorable weather conditions. Years later, tormented by guilt for the role he had played in that event, Etherly ended up in a psychiatric hospital. Anders called him the last victim of Hiroshima and wrote, "You are precious to us because you show that it is possible to keep one's conscience alive even after being used, like a cog, in a machine you don't understand." A line that flips every judgment on its head and shines a light on the tragedy of living in a world where decisions are carried out by people who neither choose them nor grasp their consequences. One of the most disturbing passages in Anders's work deals with the dissociation between action and responsibility. He writes that nowadays, it's possible to kill by pressing a button. This mechanism makes the act of destruction invisible, faceless, and therefore no longer felt as real. It's the logic of distance, abstraction, and moral detachment. There's no victim to see, no pain to hear, no crime to recognize. It's the triumph of action without visible consequence, an action that dulls the conscience and drains all meaning from ethics. In this sense, every house is a prison, every screen a jailer. A sentence that may sound exaggerated today, but perfectly matches Anders's analysis of consumer society. With the rise of radio and television, people began to experience a new form of isolation. Not the solitude of the hermit or the togetherness of the public square, but the quiet atomization of domestic consumption. Sitting in front of a screen, millions of people, separated yet identical, each inside their own shell, absorbing information, entertainment, and mass culture passively. Anders calls them homeworkers, but not because they produce anything. They consume. And in consuming, they take part in the manufacturing of the mass man. A cruel paradox. They pay to become something standardized, predictable, stripped of individuality. No one is forcing anyone, yet everyone plays along. And so, freedom becomes the most deceptive face of captivity. The new concentration camps, a couch and a television. A powerful, extreme image, but disturbingly accurate. It's not a direct quote from Anders, yet it captures the essence of his critique. In his view, there's no need to build new camps. Just flood people with standardized content, delivered daily, shaping thoughts, emotions, and desires. The mass man needs no bars. He's trapped in a system that distracts and satisfies him just enough to keep him from thinking. Media presence, Anders explains, is fundamentally ambiguous. The images appear, the voices echo, but there's no way to respond. It's a one-sided relationship, lacking any real interaction, and so the viewer feels informed but remains in a state of total powerlessness. Anders gives this condition a precise name: phantom. The world delivered through media is a phantom world, both present and absent, real yet untouchable, vivid but without reciprocity. Anders didn't stop at criticism. He kept fighting, writing, denouncing, right up to the end of his life. He joined anti-war protests, advocated for peace, and worked to awaken people's awareness. His legacy remains one of the most brutally honest and urgently needed of our time. His thinking doesn't ask for comfort, nor does it offer easy hope. It demands to be faced head-on, like a ruthless mirror held up to the age we live in. In the age of technology, true resistance begins with consciousness, the kind that refuses to adapt, refuses to fade, refuses to become obsolete. The kind that keeps questioning, even when everything screams to forget. Every generation inherits a power it rarely understands, and a responsibility it would rather not bear. But those who dare to look their time in the eye also hold the power to change it. If we've truly become incapable of understanding what we've created, who, then, will stop the machine we've set in motion? And faced with the very real possibility of our own extinction, is passive spectatorship still an option?